school, I did shop, just like every other kid did back then. And when I got married, I got into sheet metal fabrication and metal stamping and such. So I had a good background in cutting stuff and things like that. And back in '65, I believe I got interested in the slot racing. So my nephew asked me if I could help him build a car. So we went to La Habra Raceway over here and found out what we needed, and we built a car. And it was really a dud at first, but little by little we started going to other raceways like Western, J&J, and learning more and more, and going faster and faster.
So your nephew, though, he didn't stick with it?
No. After we built that first car, he lost interest. I think he discovered girls.
Yeah? They're the bane.
Yeah.
So you were doing road racing and drag racing?
Strictly drag racing.
Just drag racing?
Strictly drag racing.
Okay. Now, had you been interested in drag racing, real drag racing?
Oh, yes. Yes. Back in New York, I used to race cars on weekends. I used to go down to a little drag strip called Southampton. I had a souped-up Oldsmobile that I used to drive down there, change the tires, tune it up a little different, and then run it. And back then it was just no money involved. It was just trophies. You know, no big money guys like with dragsters and stuff like that. The biggest dragster they had was a Ford Flathead, you know, and that was about it.
So you had an introduction to drag racing.
Oh, yes.
You came out and you saw the slot drag racing
Mm-hmm.
at La Habra, and considering your financial situation, it's probably a lot less expensive to get into slot racing than real racing.
Definitely. You could build a car, I think, for about $25 or something like that, after you bought the motor and the rest of the paraphernalia that went with it. German tires, the little German tires. Get German airplane tires. You guys ever use those? We used to take them, cut them, bond them on the rims. I used to soak them in Energene cleaning fluid and liquid wrench for about 3 or 4 days before I'd cut them and throw them on a rim. So I'd let them dry out, open up the holes, epoxy them onto the rims, turn them down roughly, glue up the sides. Then I'd turn them on a surface grinder by hand with a little jig that I made. I'd learned a lesson. We used to turn them at speed, and when they'd collapse, they wouldn't be true anymore. So I'd turn them while they were at slight rotation just by hand. So they were true when you got off the line. That worked great. Tires were real. I never had any problem with tires.
So when you started your drag racing career in slots cars, you said you went to J&J and to Western to see what they were doing.
Yeah.
And what was the difference between your car and their cars at the time?
Well, the difference was that they were grinding their laminations, and I wasn't at the time. Huh?
Other than half a second.
Other than half a second. I think the fastest I ever went before I started investigating those places was 1.3. And then I saw these other fellows going like 110, 115. So they were a fraction of a second or so faster than I was. But the fast guys were down to like about 110s, 111. And then as time progressed, guys got to 105, maybe 101, stuff like that. I know I started turning 101s with my drag car pretty regular. So, and that was about as fast as I got with a top fueler.
So when you saw what they were doing compared to what you started with, then what did you do to innovate? And you built new cars, I assume.
Yes.
And what were some of the techniques you were using to try to get an edge?
Well, I tried to make them more precise as far as being perfectly square. I'd make the side rails, I'd drill them together in a drill jig that I made, and then I'd bond them together in a jig that I made, so it was perfect. Everything was perfectly square. I wouldn't use end plates from the motors anymore. I'd just mount my brushes on the cars, on the side rails itself. I had the tapped holes, and I used to use the little plastic goodies that the brushes went on, and I'd screw those onto the side rails and mount the brushes on that. So that was about it. Could ground my laminations down as far as I could see that it was worthwhile. Polished them, put them on there to make them look pretty. And I think the tires were the most important part. The laminate, like I never balanced an armature. I used to run a stock armature. I'd keep the commutators running true, and I'd also polish them every so many runs. And that was about it. Good spring pressure on your brushes, because if you didn't have the proper spring pressure, you'd just blow those brushes away. That was about it. Being more precise.
Were you epoxying your armature?
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, the Pippin armatures, if you didn't epoxy them, those things blew up. The Ram armatures, I used to epoxy them, but I wasn't sure that you really needed to, because they were spot welded. The wires were spot welded to the commutator. So I'm not sure if they would blow. I never took the chance of it blowing off. So I'd epoxy them anyway. Then I'd true it up after I epoxied them, and that was about it. I never balanced an armature.
And when you epoxied them, did you use some rotational system to keep the epoxy
No.
flowing? No, you just glopped it on there.
Just globbed it on there, nice and even. And then I'd take it and turn it in my little lathe, taking all the excess off, and that was about it. Nothing special about my armatures. Used bearings. Used the, I forgot what it was, number 5 or 10 bearings, the ABEX. They were good bearings. And that's about it.
So you felt the most important thing, though, was getting the whole chassis true.
Yes, that's what I used to do. Make sure everything was true and running free. Everything was parallel. Your armature wasn't running off, centered in the laminations, not running. I saw some guys where the laminations are almost touching the armature on one side. They got this big gap on the other side. So a precise car was it as far as I was concerned.
What were your early beginnings that may have influenced you getting into slot drag racing?
Well, it started with road racing in Orange County, and wound up meeting some guys at school that were monkeying with the same things, and got interested in building cars and racing them. And then kind of growing up next to Alliance Drag Strip and knowing the family there, the Fochers, Otis Jr. Found the slot racing place, J&J's. They had a road racing track and a drag strip. It's like, hey, a drag strip. And then looking at some goodies, it's like, we got to get some of these things. So I wound up looking at things and built a couple cars, one for myself and one for Otis. And we started racing. And it was great to be there, man, and compete. I think I was 16, 17 years old. And
what year was that?
Probably 66, I'm guessing. Could have been 65. I don't know, Frank, what year it was. Is that about right, time-wise?
Well,
it's a long time ago.
In the era.
Long time ago, Bob.
Yeah,
but
it didn't last long.
But yeah, really enjoyed competing, and all the guys, like this deal. Still hang with a lot of the guys who are still around, and just a good group of guys. Was glad to be there, glad to know them, and fun to compete against them. And there was nobody in that group that I didn't get along with, and it just seemed like everybody meshed together. It just seemed like Bob Ballestein and Wayne Cartmel, those dudes were so cool. I couldn't hang with those guys, but it was fun talking to Wayne at the last deal and kind of filling in on what's been happening the last 40 years or so, whatever it's been. But
more like 50.
then Frank covered almost everything that I did in construction, except I never built a fixture. And just thinking about it, when I have idle time, I'm going, how did I do that? Because I didn't have any real tools. I did everything in my dad's garage. He had a drill press, just a kind of rinky-dink little drill press, and did most everything on that, and hand filed everything, and I must have had good eyeballs then, because those little 440 double lot screws or whatever they were, I could get those in straight and not get them all, crossed up, so things would wind up straight. And I can't remember scrapping a car before the thing was done. I don't remember ever throwing any magnesium rails in the trash can. But I don't know if I could do it today. I don't know, but at least I have a few more machines. But then you mentioned the epoxy and the armatures. I did at my parents' barbecue. I used their barbecue motor to turn it while the thing was setting up, so the epoxy would wind up even.
Mm-hmm.
That's about the only thing I did that you didn't. But yeah, kind of reminiscent about turning the tires and all that stuff. I was lucky for a little while. I was working this place called Monaco Products in Buena Park, and they sold tires, and I was able to buy the junk from J&J's and then turn them and glue them together and turn them on a precision machine that was meant to do tires,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of helped. I mean, might have had a little advantage. I don't know.
They were making slot car parts?
Road racing.
Okay.
But they made, slot car tires for road racing.
Not real tires.
No, all and they just had a couple little grinding machines for different size tires, and I was able to use that, try to make something precision that would go, because they were going like 50, 60 miles an hour at the end of that thing is kind of what somebody figured them in to be. So a little, I don't know, how big were those things?
Well, 1
inch and a half.
1 3/8 or something like that, yeah.
So
Half inch wide, 1 3/8 was your max size.
Pretty serious spinning at the end of that thing. You could watch them grow, it seems like.